Most people think they are thinking when they are actually reacting. A thought appears, an emotion follows it, and within seconds, they have already accepted a conclusion without examining where it came from. Someone criticizes them and they become defensive. Someone praises them and they immediately assume that person can be trusted. An opportunity appears and excitement tells them to say yes. A setback occurs and fear tells them to quit. They call these reactions instinct, but many of them are simply old patterns operating automatically. Smarter thinking begins when you interrupt that pattern. The most important moment is often the small space between what happens and what you do about it. That space gives you the opportunity to observe your own mind instead of becoming a prisoner of it. You do not have to believe the first thought that appears. You do not have to obey every emotion. You do not have to immediately decide what another person's behavior means. You can pause and ask a more powerful question. What do I actually know? This question sounds simple, but it can completely change the way you make decisions. Your mind constantly tries to complete incomplete information. If someone does not answer your message, your mind may immediately create a story. Perhaps they are angry, perhaps they are losing interest, perhaps they are disrespecting you, but the only fact you possess is that they did not answer. Everything beyond that is interpretation. The same mistake happens everywhere. Someone disagrees with your opinion, and you decide they are against you. Someone receives an opportunity you wanted, and you assume they are luckier than you. You make one mistake and conclude that you are incapable. You experience one bad relationship and begin believing that nobody can be trusted. The mind turns individual experiences into universal rules because certainty feels safer than uncertainty. Smarter thinking requires you to resist that temptation. Learn to separate facts from stories. A fact can be observed. An interpretation is the meaning you attach to that fact. The difference matters because interpretations can be wrong. And if your interpretation is wrong, every decision based on it becomes weaker. This is especially important when emotions are involved. Anger can make a minor disagreement feel like a personal attack. Fear can make a difficult opportunity look impossible. Excitement can make a risky decision appear guaranteed to succeed. Insecurity can turn neutral behavior into evidence of rejection. Your emotions are real, but their interpretation may not be. You should not suppress emotions. You should study them. When you feel anger, ask what triggered it. When you feel fear, ask what you believe will happen. When you feel jealousy, ask what insecurity is underneath it. When you feel unusually confident because someone praised you, ask whether your confidence is coming from your own judgment or from external approval. This kind of observation creates psychological distance. Instead of saying, I am angry, you begin thinking, I am experiencing anger and I need to understand why. That small shift gives you control. You become the observer of your mind rather than simply the victim of its impulses. The same principle applies to your opinions. Many of the beliefs you defend passionately were not consciously chosen. They may have come from your family, culture, friends, education, experiences, or the people you repeatedly listened to. You accepted certain ideas because they were familiar, not necessarily because you examined them. A smarter mind asks, why do I believe this? Then it asks something even harder. What evidence would make me change my mind? That question protects you from intellectual arrogance. There is a dangerous desire inside human beings to be right. Once we attach our identity to an opinion, evidence against that opinion can feel like an attack against ourselves. We begin searching for information that confirms what we already believe and ignoring information that challenges it. Smarter thinking requires the courage to discover that you were wrong. Changing your mind when reality proves you wrong is not weakness. It is evidence that your commitment is to truth rather than ego. Begin practicing this in ordinary situations. Before responding to criticism, pause. Before judging someone's motives, gather more information. Before making an emotional decision, wait until the emotion becomes quieter. Before accepting your own assumption as fact, ask what evidence supports it. You do not need to analyze every moment of your life. That would become exhausting. You simply need to become conscious at the moments when your reactions can create consequences. The angry message you send can damage a relationship. The impulsive decision can cost you an opportunity. The assumption you never questioned can keep you trapped. The fear you automatically obey can prevent you from discovering what you are capable of. The pause changes everything. With practice, you begin developing a mind that does not immediately surrender to the first interpretation. You become slower to judge, faster to observe, and more willing to examine what you believe. You stop confusing certainty with truth. That is where smarter thinking begins, not by filling your mind with more information, but by becoming more disciplined about what you allow your mind to accept. And once you learn to question your first reaction, you must learn to maintain that clarity when emotions become powerful enough to distort your judgment. Once you learn to question your first reaction, you discover another uncomfortable truth about the human mind. Even when you understand that your first thought may be wrong, powerful emotions can still push you toward poor decisions. You may know that anger is temporary, yet still feel compelled to respond. You may understand that fear exaggerates uncertainty, yet still avoid the opportunity in front of you. You may recognize that excitement can distort judgment, yet still rush toward what feels good in the moment. Smarter thinking, therefore, requires more than intelligence. It requires emotional discipline. Your emotions are not your enemy. They are signals. They tell you something is happening inside you, but they do not always tell you what is actually happening outside you. Anger may tell you that you feel disrespected. Fear may tell you that you perceive danger. Jealousy may reveal insecurity. Excitement may reveal desire. Disappointment may reveal that your expectations were unrealistic. The emotion contains information, but the conclusion you attach to that emotion still needs to be examined. This distinction is crucial. When anger appears, most people immediately search for a target. They think, who caused this? A smarter thinker asks, what exactly happened, and what part of my reaction belongs to me? That question creates distance between emotion and judgment. You may discover that someone genuinely crossed a boundary, but you may also discover that your ego simply disliked being challenged. The difference matters because your response should depend on reality, not merely intensity. A strong emotion can make a small problem feel enormous. Someone makes a careless comment, and suddenly you are imagining everything they have ever done wrong. One disagreement becomes a battle. One mistake becomes proof that everything is failing. The mind begins connecting unrelated events because emotion wants a larger story. This is why you must learn to slow down. Do not make permanent decisions from temporary emotional states. When you are extremely angry, wait before sending the message. When you are deeply afraid, gather more information before deciding that something is impossible. When you are excessively excited, examine the risks before committing. When you are hurt, give yourself enough distance to understand what actually happened. Waiting is not weakness. Sometimes waiting is intelligence in action. People often believe that the fastest response is the smartest response. It is not. Speed is useful when circumstances demand immediate action, but in many situations, speed simply allows emotion to make the decision before reason has a chance to participate. You should also learn to recognize the physical signs of emotional escalation. Your breathing changes. Your heart beats faster. Your muscles tighten. Your thoughts become repetitive. You begin rehearsing arguments in your head. These signals are warnings that your emotional system is becoming dominant. When you recognize them, pause, take a breath. Step away if necessary, return. When your mind is capable of seeing more than one possibility, this practice changes the quality of your decisions because you begin responding instead of reacting. Emotional discipline also protects you from manipulation. People who understand your emotional triggers can influence your behavior if you allow them to. Someone knows that disrespect makes you angry, so they provoke you. Someone knows you fear rejection, so they withdraw attention. Someone knows you crave approval, so they offer praise when they want something from you. If you are unaware of your emotional triggers, other people can learn to operate them. But when you understand yourself, those buttons become harder to press. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. A person without emotions is not necessarily intelligent. The goal is integration. You feel the emotion, understand its message, and then allow reason to determine the response. think of anger as an alarm, not a steering wheel. Think of fear as a warning, not a command. Think of excitement as energy, not evidence. Think of sadness as information, not a permanent identity. Think of confidence as something grounded in reality, not something dependent on praise. This mindset also changes how you handle criticism. When someone criticizes you, your ego may immediately defend itself, but instead of asking, "How dare they say that?" ask, "Is there anything useful here? If there is, take it. If there is not, let it pass." You do not have to accept every opinion about yourself, but you should be willing to examine every useful piece of information. That balance is emotional intelligence. The smartest person in the room is not necessarily the one who knows the most facts. It may be the person who can remain calm enough to recognize when their own emotions are distorting those facts. Learn to create space between feeling and action. In that space, your judgment becomes clearer, your decisions become more deliberate, and your mind becomes less vulnerable to pressure, because once emotions stop controlling your decisions, you are ready to look beyond individual events and begin recognizing the deeper patterns hidden beneath them. Once you learn to create distance between emotion and judgment, your mind becomes capable of something even more powerful: seeing patterns beneath the surface. Most people judge life one event at a time. They look at what someone said today, what happened yesterday, or what appears obvious in a single moment. Smarter thinking goes deeper. It asks what repeatedly happens, why it happens, what incentives are operating beneath it, and where the pattern is likely to lead. A single event can be misleading. A pattern rarely is. Imagine someone who promises to help you, but repeatedly disappears whenever you need them. The first time, you may accept an explanation. The second time, you may become suspicious. The third, fourth, and fifth time, the behavior is no longer an isolated incident. It has become information. A smarter thinker does not remain trapped in the excuses surrounding each individual event. They step back and observe the pattern. This does not mean assuming the worst about people. It means becoming attentive to consistency. People reveal themselves through repeated behavior more than isolated words. Someone can say they value honesty, but their actions will eventually demonstrate whether that value is real. Someone can claim to respect your boundaries, but their behavior will reveal whether they actually do. Someone can promise change, but repeated behavior will tell you whether the promise has substance. This is why observation is more powerful than immediate judgment. You do not need to interrogate everyone. You need to watch carefully. Notice what happens when someone does not get what they want. Notice how they treat people who cannot benefit them. Notice whether their behavior changes depending on who is watching. Notice how they respond to criticism. Notice whether they accept responsibility or always search for someone else to blame. These details reveal more than polished words ever could. Smarter thinking also means understanding incentives. People often behave according to what they believe they will gain or avoid. If you understand the incentive behind an action, behavior becomes easier to interpret. Someone may flatter you because they genuinely admire you. They may also flatter you because they want something. Someone may suddenly become friendly because they value your company. They may also be approaching because they need your help. The point is not to become paranoid. The point is to stop assuming that every visible behavior has only one possible explanation. Ask yourself, what might this person gain from this? Then ask, what evidence supports that interpretation? This prevents your mind from turning possibilities into certainties. The same principle applies to your own behavior. You must learn to examine your motives as honestly as you examine the motives of others. Sometimes you tell yourself that you are helping someone because you are generous when part of you actually wants to feel needed. Sometimes you say you are avoiding conflict because you value peace when you are actually afraid of confrontation. Sometimes you claim you do not care about success when you are protecting yourself from the possibility of failure. Smarter thinking requires self-observation as well as observation of others. Look for contradictions. When someone's words and actions disagree, do not immediately choose the words because they sound better. When your intentions and behavior disagree, do not automatically believe your intentions. Behavior is evidence, Bot pols also help you make better predictions. You cannot know the future with certainty, but you can improve your judgment by recognizing what usually follows what. If you repeatedly spend money without planning, financial stress is predictable. If you consistently avoid difficult conversations, unresolved problems are predictable. If you surround yourself with people who constantly discourage growth, stagnation becomes more likely. If you consistently delay important work, pressure eventually increases. Smarter thinking is partly the ability to connect causes with consequences. Do not ask only what is happening. Ask, what is this likely to create? That question moves your mind beyond the present moment. It also protects you from being impressed by appearances. A person may appear successful while being financially unstable. Someone may appear confident while secretly depending on constant approval. A relationship may look perfect publicly while being unhealthy privately. A business opportunity may sound exciting while hiding enormous risks. Appearances provide information, but they are not the whole picture. Learn to look underneath. This does not require you to become suspicious or cynical. It requires patience. Give situations enough time to reveal themselves. Let people demonstrate who they are. Let repeated behavior provide evidence. Let consequences expose what immediate appearances conceal. The smartest thinker is rarely the person who speaks first. Often, it is the person who notices what everyone else ignored. Observe before judging, look for repetition, examine incentives, compare words with actions, study consequences, question your own motives. These habits transform the way you understand people and situations. You stop being easily impressed by appearances and easily manipulated by emotional narratives. You begin seeing structures instead of isolated events. And once you learn to recognize patterns, motives, and consequences, the next level of smarter thinking is learning to make decisions based not only on what is happening now, but on what your choices will create tomorrow. Once you learn to recognize patterns, motives, and consequences, you begin to see why smarter thinking is not simply about knowing more. It is about seeing farther. Most people make decisions according to what feels important right now. They chase immediate rewards, avoid immediate discomfort, and react to whatever problem is directly in front of them. But a decision should not be judged only by what it produces today. It should also be judged by what it creates tomorrow, next month, and eventually years from now. This is where strategic thinking begins. A smart mind learns to look beyond the first consequence. Imagine someone receives an opportunity that offers quick money but requires them to sacrifice their reputation. In the moment, the reward may appear attractive, but what happens afterward? If the decision damages trust, future opportunities may disappear. The immediate gain may be real, but the long-term cost may be much larger. This is why you should train yourself to ask a second question after every important decision. And then what? That question forces your mind beyond the obvious. You decide to avoid a difficult conversation. Fine. And then what? The problem remains unresolved. You continue avoiding it. Resentment grows. Eventually, the relationship becomes more difficult to repair. You decide to spend money impulsively. And then what? Perhaps nothing happens immediately. But repeated impulsive decisions reduce your financial freedom and increase future pressure. You decide to accept every request because you do not want to disappoint people. And then what? Your time disappears. Your priorities suffer. Eventually, you become resentful toward the very people you were trying to please. Smarter thinking considers consequences before they arrive. This does not mean predicting the future perfectly. Nobody can. Strategic thinking simply means recognizing likely outcomes and preparing for them. Before making a major decision, consider at least 3 possibilities. What happens if everything goes well? What happens if things go badly? And what happens if something unexpected occurs? Most people prepare only for success. They imagine the reward but ignore the risks. They imagine the opportunity but ignore the responsibility. They imagine the freedom but ignore the cost of maintaining it. A smarter thinker asks harder questions. What could go wrong? What am I not seeing? What would make this decision fail? What will this choice cost me if I am wrong? What will happen if I continue doing nothing? That last question is particularly important because inaction is also a decision. People often believe that refusing to choose keeps them safe. It does not. Sometimes avoiding a decision simply allows circumstances to make the decision for you. Strategic thinking also requires prioritization. You cannot pursue every opportunity, solve every problem, or respond to every person. Your attention is limited, your energy is limited, your time is limited. So ask yourself what deserves your resources. A person who treats every problem as equally important eventually becomes overwhelmed. A smarter thinker distinguishes between what is urgent and what is important. Some problems demand immediate action, others can wait. Some opportunities look exciting, but do not contribute meaningfully to your long-term direction. You must learn to recognize the difference. This applies to relationships as well. Before becoming deeply invested in someone, consider not only how you feel around them today, but what kind of life your connection is creating. Do they encourage clarity or confusion, growth or stagnation, stability or constant emotional chaos? The present feeling matters, but the pattern matters more. Strategic thinking is also about understanding opportunity cost. Every yes is a no to something else. When you spend 3 hours scrolling through meaningless content, those 3 hours cannot also be used to develop a skill. When you constantly chase approval, you have less energy available for building your own direction. You are always spending something. Sometimes it is money. Sometimes it is time. Sometimes it is attention. Sometimes it is peace. The smarter thinker asks whether the price is worth paying. This mindset also changes how you respond to failure. Instead of seeing failure as a final judgment, you examine what it teaches you about your strategy. Perhaps the goal was correct, but the method was wrong. Perhaps the timing was poor. Perhaps you lacked information. Perhaps the risk was greater than you understood. The question becomes, what should I change? Not, why am I doomed? This keeps your mind focused on adjustment rather than helplessness. You should also become comfortable delaying gratification. Immediate pleasure is persuasive because it is visible. Long-term rewards are often invisible until much later. Discipline means making decisions today that your future self will thank you for. You study now so you can think better later. You save now so you can have greater freedom later. You practice now so your skill becomes valuable later. You endure temporary discomfort so you can avoid larger problems later. This is not about living without pleasure. It is about refusing to sacrifice your future for every impulse that appears in the present. Smarter thinking asks a simple question again and again. Where does this lead? Ask it about your habits. Ask it about your relationships. Ask it about your money. Ask it about your career. Ask it about your reactions. Ask it about the beliefs you repeatedly reinforce. Because your life is not created by isolated moments. It is created by consequences accumulating over time. And once you begin thinking several moves ahead, you must develop one final intellectual discipline, the courage to abandon an idea when reality proves that it is wrong. One of the greatest obstacles to smarter thinking is not a lack of intelligence. It is the emotional attachment to being right. People often defend their opinions long after reality has given them reasons to reconsider. They collect evidence that supports what they already believe and dismiss anything that threatens their conclusion. They call this confidence, but often it is simply ego protecting itself. If you want to think more intelligently, you must become ruthless with your assumptions. An assumption is a conclusion you accept without fully examining it. Sometimes assumptions are useful. You cannot investigate every small detail of life. But problems begin when assumptions become invisible. You stop realizing that you are assuming anything at all. You assume someone dislikes you because they were distant. You assume you will fail because you failed before. You assume an opportunity is perfect because it looks attractive. You assume someone is trustworthy because they speak confidently. You assume your opinion is correct because everyone around you agrees. The danger is not making assumptions. The danger is refusing to question them. Ask yourself, what am I assuming right now? That single question can expose weaknesses in your reasoning. Then ask, what evidence supports this belief? And finally, ask the question most people avoid. What evidence would prove me wrong? If you cannot answer the final question, you may not be thinking objectively. You may simply be defending a position. Smarter thinking requires intellectual humility. This does not mean constantly doubting yourself or becoming indecisive. It means understanding that your knowledge is incomplete. You can be intelligent and still misunderstand a situation. You can be experienced and still make a mistake. You can be confident and still be wrong. The ability to say, "I was wrong," is not a loss of power. It is a demonstration of control over your ego. Imagine you make a decision based on certain information. Later, new evidence appears and shows that your original conclusion was flawed. You now have two choices. You can defend the old decision because admitting the mistake feels humiliating, or you can update your thinking because reality matters more than your pride. The second choice is smarter. Your goal should not be to protect your previous opinion. Your goal should be to improve your current understanding. This is why confirmation bias is so dangerous. Once people believe something, they naturally notice information that supports it and overlook information that challenges it. If you believe someone is dishonest, every mistake they make becomes evidence. Their honest actions become exceptions. If you believe you are incapable, every failure becomes proof while every success is dismissed as luck. The mind becomes a lawyer arguing for a verdict it already decided. You must become the judge instead. Listen to the evidence on both sides. Look for contradictions. Seek information that challenges your preferred conclusion. Talk to people who disagree with you without assuming they are enemies. Read perspectives that make you uncomfortable, not because every opposing opinion is correct, but because exposure to disagreement reveals weaknesses in your reasoning. There is another important form of intellectual honesty. Admitting when you do not know. Many people feel pressured to have an answer immediately. They would rather give a confident wrong answer than admit uncertainty. But "I don't know yet" can be one of the most intelligent statements you make. Uncertainty is not ignorance. Sometimes uncertainty is accuracy. You do not have enough information, so you gather more. You do not understand the situation, so you observe. You are unsure about someone's intentions, so you wait for behavior to reveal more. You do not know whether a decision will work, so you examine the risks and prepare alternatives. This is disciplined thinking. And when new information appears, update your beliefs. Do not treat changing your mind as betrayal of your identity. Your identity should not be attached to being permanently correct. It should be attached to being willing to learn. Think of your beliefs as tools rather than possessions. If a tool no longer works, replace it. If an idea is outdated, improve it. If an assumption is disproven, abandon it. You are not losing part of yourself by changing your mind. You are removing an obstacle from your mind. This becomes especially important as you become more successful. The more experience you gain, the easier it becomes to believe that you already understand everything. Success can create its own form of blindness. You begin trusting your instincts because they worked before, but circumstances change, people change, markets change, relationships change, you change. A strategy that worked 5 years ago may fail today. A belief that protected you in one environment may limit you in another. Smarter thinking remains flexible without becoming directionless. Hold strong principles, but remain flexible about methods. Know what you value, but remain willing to change how you pursue it. Know what you want, but remain willing to accept that your understanding of the path may be incomplete. The strongest mind is not the mind that never changes. It is the mind that changes for the right reasons. Become ruthless with your assumptions. Question what feels obvious. Examine what you believe. Search for evidence that challenges you. Admit uncertainty when necessary. Change your position when reality demands it, because the moment you stop protecting your ego and start protecting the truth, your thinking becomes far more powerful. And once you learn to update your beliefs without losing your direction, you are ready to develop the highest form of smarter thinking. The ability to think independently when everyone around you is thinking for you. The highest form of smarter thinking is not simply knowing how to analyze information. It is developing the courage to form your own conclusions. The world is full of voices telling you what to believe or what to admire, what success should look like, and even how you should live. Some of those voices are useful. Others are simply loud. If you allow every opinion around you to become part of your thinking without examination, you may spend your entire life following conclusions that were never truly yours. Independent thinking begins when you stop confusing popularity with truth. A belief does not become correct because thousands of people repeat it. A decision does not become wise because everyone around you approves of it. A path does not become right simply because it is familiar. Crowds can be wrong. Experts can be wrong. Friends can be wrong. You can also be wrong. The goal is not to reject everyone else's ideas. The goal is to examine them before accepting them. When you hear an opinion, ask yourself why you believe it. What evidence supports it? What evidence challenges it? What assumptions are hidden inside it? Who benefits if you accept it? What would happen if the opposite were true? These questions protect your mind from becoming passive. Social pressure is one of the strongest forces influencing human behavior because people naturally want belonging. We want to be accepted. We want approval. We want to feel that we are part of something. But the desire to belong can become dangerous when it becomes stronger than the desire to think clearly. You may agree with an idea simply because everyone around you agrees. You may remain in a situation because leaving would make you different. You may pursue a career because your environment considers it successful. You may buy things because other people have them. You may repeat opinions you have never investigated because challenging them would make you uncomfortable. Smarter thinking requires the courage to step outside that pressure. Sometimes you must be willing to stand alone long enough to discover what you actually believe. This does not mean becoming rebellious for the sake of rebellion. Automatically opposing the crowd is just another form of dependence. If everyone says yes and you say no simply because you want to appear independent, the crowd is still controlling you. True independence means you can agree without becoming submissive and disagree without becoming hostile. You listen, you evaluate, then you decide. This ability becomes especially valuable when making important life decisions. Other people may give you advice, but they do not have to live with the consequences of your choices. They may tell you what they would do, but their circumstances, personality, values, and goals may be completely different from yours. Listen to advice, but do not outsource your judgment. Your life requires your responsibility. Independent thinking also requires knowing your values. If you do not know what matters to you, the loudest influence around you will define your priorities. You will chase status because society tells you status matters. You will chase money because everyone else is chasing money. You will seek approval because you never decided what kind of person you wanted to become. Clarity about your values gives your mind a foundation. Then information becomes something you evaluate rather than something that controls you. You can learn from people without becoming copies of them. You can study successful individuals without assuming their exact path will work for you. You can admire someone's discipline while developing your own system. You can learn from history without becoming trapped by tradition. The purpose of knowledge is not imitation. It is integration. Take useful ideas, test them against reality, and make them your own. Independent thinking also means learning to tolerate uncertainty. Sometimes there will not be a perfect answer. You may have to make a decision with incomplete information. In those moments, you cannot wait forever for certainty. Gather the best evidence available, understand the risks, make the most reasonable decision, and remain willing to adjust when reality provides new information. That is intelligent independence. You do not need to know everything. You need to know how to think. Question, observe, compare, test, decide, learn, repeat. Over time, these habits create something more valuable than confidence. Judgment allows you to recognize when an opportunity is worth pursuing, when a person deserves trust, when a belief needs to change, when emotion is distorting your perception, and when silence is wiser than reaction. This is the real purpose of smarter thinking, not to make you superior to other people, but to make you less dependent on their opinions, not to make you suspicious, but to make you observant, not to make you emotionless, but to make you capable of thinking while emotions are present, not to make you permanently certain, but to make you comfortable enough with uncertainty to continue learning. A powerful mind is not one that knows every answer, It is one that knows how to search for better answers without allowing ego, fear, pressure, or habit to decide in advance. The world will always offer you ready-made conclusions. Your responsibility is to decide which ones deserve a place in your mind. Think for yourself. Question intelligently. Observe carefully. Change your mind when reality demands it. And above all, never surrender the responsibility of your judgment to someone simply because they speak with confidence. Because when you learn to think independently, you do not merely become smarter, you become the author